So it was a bit of a mad rush to get down here. I made a bit of a schoolboy error as per usual in that I was aiming to arrive here for sunrise this morning when probably the best colour was on the way down here. So a good kind of half an hour before sunrise probably would have been better to get the reds in the sky, whereas now you can't even see it behind me, but it's kind of fading to orange and yellow tones, probably as the sun is about to peak up from behind the horizon. And I'm probably a little bit underdressed for this time of day as well. It's a bit chilly, and because we're now nearly approaching May here in the UK, I thought I could do without my gloves, but obviously it's still a little brisk in some mornings. So anyway, if you haven't guessed already, I'm here at West Bay, and even though it would have been nice to have a great colourful sunrise shot of the kind of the mound here, which is famous through Broadchurch and other kind of dramas here in the UK, I've actually bought 2 film cameras with me today. So basically I've had a lot of success in the past with a 105-year-old #2 folding Brownie autographic camera, which I used in Lyme Regis in this video. But as much as I enjoyed using that camera, it was very temperamental and it's getting quite delicate now. So I basically started looking out for a newer, I say newer, the 2 folding cameras I bought with me today are well over 50 years old, but they have a few more kind of functions which I'll talk about, which might help me to compose my images, because it was quite difficult on that folding Brownie camera. I also think as well, down here at the moment, this time of year, the sunset is probably a better proposition than sunrise, because obviously sunset, the sun will set more over that way, so you get then a golden glow across this part of the coastline, whereas as the sun is probably going to rise from behind it, it's not going to kind of get that light to really kind of lift this scene. I came down to sunrise for a reason really, and that's basically we're now approaching holidays and summertime here in the southwest, and it starts to get really quite busy down here, so I thought I'd come down early when no one's about and shoot this video today. So yeah, so I'll talk about the folding cameras, I might as well while I'm here, because I'm probably limited with the shutter speed that I can use with these cameras today. I've loaded up some fresh HP5 plus 400 120 film into these cameras because they are medium format folding film cameras, so hopefully I should be able to get some really good 6x6 images here today. So I just put on some B-roll. When I parked up, I managed to get back in the car and turn off the lights, and also I managed to take a couple scenes where the colours were a bit more prominent than they are now. Obviously I'm keeping an eye on the scene in case something does happen and it's worth capturing an image. But I have obviously been down here before and captured some nice images at other times of the year. And I think to get the best of it, like I said, it's probably a sunset time rather than a sunrise. But anyway, for the purposes of today's video, which like I said is going to be using some medium format folding cameras, there's certainly a lot of interest around down here with this scene, the rocks, the beaches, and then you've got the harbour. And yeah, I haven't really properly explored all of West Bay before, so I'm planning to do that today. On Monday I'm going out to a Dutch barn, it's Sixpenny Handley, and if I've got any exposures left then, I'll take some exposures then just to finish the rolls of film, because even though I'm limited to 12 exposures with medium format film, I probably will only look to take about 10 compositions and double up at the start of the film and at the end of the film, just in case there's any peculiarities with developing the film in the lab box or even getting the film out of the camera in the first place. So what film cameras have I bought today then? So let's start with the first one that I bought, which was this one here for the princely sum of £24 on eBay. And I think really the seller didn't really know what it was, and because you can probably see here the two basically openings, window openings on the front, means that this camera has what they call an uncoupled rangefinder. So basically when you look through the tiny viewfinder, there's another image inside which you can move with this dial here to basically set your focus. So basically you open up the camera with this switch here as well. It doesn't spring out as well as it probably did when it was first released. And then you set your shutter speed and your aperture, and then depending on what the rangefinder tells you up here, you set the focus on the very front of this ring. So it has got a light meter, so I brought an external light meter with me to basically give me those settings that I need to expose the image correctly. So like I said, I don't think the seller fully knew what this camera was, because finders, especially working finders, obviously this was sold as untested, but I've run through the settings, and other than a bit of a sticky shutter speeds, the kind of the slow speeds, and the frame counter doesn't work on this one it seems, and the double exposure protection doesn't work either. But I'm hoping that I'll be able to get something out of this camera at the very least. So yeah, this one only cost me £24 delivered on eBay, and this is the first time I've put film in it to test. So I'll be interested to see what its results are. It's got relatively slow aperture on this lens, only f4.5, but I'll be interested to see what it can be capable of. A quick look on Flickr does show some kind of interesting results. So yeah, so that's now camera number one. It's actually freezing down here today. The second one is a little bit newer, released around 1964. Used to be called the Shanghai 203, but is now called the Seagull 203. So it's a Chinese camera, and this one is a little bit more sophisticated, if it works, in that its rangefinder is coupled. So whereas the other one was uncoupled, that meant you had to adjust the rangefinder, and then whatever the setting was, put that onto the front of the lens. Whereas this one, when you adjust the lens, you're actually moving the image in the viewfinder to align. So it basically means it's all joined up. You don't have to then adjust it here and then adjust it on the lens. It's all done for you. This one pops out like so. It's quite a good pop out, this one. So it comes down from the front. Again, you set the aperture and the shutter speed. Like I said, the front ring is the focusing and the coupled rangefinder, and then you've got the shutter here. With this one, the lens doesn't look in quite as good condition as the Balda, but again, I'm not going to be able to see how much of an effect that has until I actually run a film through it, which is the purpose of this video today. This one, I've tested the functions, and the double exposure protection actually works, and it's got a bit of a light exposure guide, not a light meter, but you can in theory use it without a light meter and just use the kind of the conditions to tell you what kind of exposure you should be giving the camera to correctly expose the scene. And that's something, if this works out okay, I might be willing to give a go without an actual light meter in tow. So I've tested this one. The speeds seem good on the shutter speed. The only thing that doesn't seem to be working at the moment is the self timer. It just is completely stuck. So obviously we'll give that one a miss. Whereas on the Balda, the self timer actually worked. So yeah, so that's the two cameras. I might, when I get back to the van later on and warm up and have some breakfast, I might just talk a little bit more about some of the points I might have missed. And then they phoned up quite nice. I just think, I was just looking for, it's amazing to think this is a medium format camera. And The only other medium format camera I've got is obviously my Yashica twin lens reflex camera, which weighs quite a lot and it takes a little bit of time setting up in order to get a shot, whereas this one is obviously a lot more compact. Like, I've managed to fit 3 cameras in this little messenger bag today, so it's definitely a lot easier to transport and take out with you and take pictures. But anyway, my hands are freezing, so I'm going to put them in my pockets. This is also another test of my Olympus EM5. This time I'm actually out in a photography location, so I'll be really interested to see how well the quality compares to my previous videos using the Osmo Pocket. It's definitely a lot easier to see myself in the scene. I've just got to remember not to look at the monitor, but to actually look at the actual lens. Right, so I'm starting to get some reasonable readings with my light meter now, and I've put up some of the digital images as well that I've taken of this composition here, but I'll just talk you through the process to take this particular image, which will look nice in a square format while there's still some kind of cloud in the sky. So let's do another reading here. So it's telling me for an aperture of about 4, I can get away with a 60th of a second, or an aperture of 5.6, I can get away with 1/30th. I think, because this is my first shot, I'm probably going to go with an aperture of f4 or 4.5 on the Balda, and then a 60th of a second for this first composition. So let's get that done. Well, I still can feel my fingers. Right, so let's go with the Balda first, which is the first camera I got. Let's open it out. Right, so dial in aperture of, it's widest aperture, 4.5, and a shutter speed of, well, 50th. Let's go for 50th. And then it's quite hard to hold, especially when my hands are cold. And like I said, the viewfinder is absolutely tiny. I think that's set to infinity. So set to infinity on the lens at the arrow there. And then that should be ready to go. So I'll wait for a good wave. Try and get down a bit lower. Oh yeah, one thing you've got to remember to do as well is cock the shutter on these. So the shutter cocked. Take the picture. And then what I'll do then is I'll open up the back, and where it's on 1 now, wind it on. There we go, number 2. So it's all ready to take again. So like I said, oh, you missed my head off then. Like I said, I'm just going to take 2 exposures first time with both cameras, just in case of any lab box peculiarities. Again, I keep forgetting, got to cock the shutter. And there we go. So open up the back again, wind on. It's got a bit of like a ratcheting winding on system here. And then we go 3, ready to go again. It's quite nice actually, you've got to cock the shutter, because it means you don't have to worry about the shutter firing off by accident. So that's the Balda one done. Let's just fire up the Seagull. Right, so we said about an aperture of f4, didn't we? Aperture of f4. You've got to kind of almost decouple the ring on this one. And it has got an f60th on this one, so that's what I'll change it to. And then cock the shutter, and then I'll focus it. Oh, it's a little bit easier to use this one, to be honest. As long as I can feel my fingers. There we go, that's about it. And again, it's probably on infinity as well. So let's get ready. Right, that's one done. Right, again, I'll lift up the back to wind it on. It's very hard to see. Oh, I can see it now. 2. Right, cock the shutter again. Yowza, that hurt. And take the shot. So Sam, wind on again. 3, it's quite an aggressive mechanism that, so I've got to be careful when I wind that on. So let's close it back up. And that's basically the process from start to finish with using these cameras, hopefully. So yeah, I'll go off and find some more compositions now, try and warm up my hands a little bit because they're a bit cold, and we'll see what other compositions I can find down here at West Bay. Not sure how well this is going to come across because I've got the heater on in the van, because as I said earlier, it's absolutely freezing. And yeah, so I think despite arriving a little bit too late for the actual sunrise this morning, and as I said earlier as well, the sun didn't really break through, but on the whole, I'm pleased with the compositions I was able to find for both my digital and these folding cameras. Oh, that's something that I've noticed. The eyepiece for one of the cameras keeps on falling out, so that might need a bit of attention. If I use this camera again, it kind of just seems to just sit there a bit precariously. I did actually find that the Seagull at one stage, I didn't feel confident that the actual rangefinder was working, but when I went to a different composition and tried it again, it did seem to work well. So fingers crossed the results should be okay. So, but on the whole, between these two cameras, even though I did struggle with this one loading the film, it does have benefits over the Balda, which can only be used with 6x6 exposures. So you can only get 12 exposures on a roll of 120 film, whereas with the Seagull, it has the option on the back to actually shoot 16 exposures on a roll of film, so you get 6 by 4.5 inch exposures. So that's definitely something that I want to try out, as long as the results this time around with the Seagull work okay. Yeah, so in the field as well, I definitely felt that the Seagull was easier to use, just mainly because the actual patch that you use in the rangefinder was a lot clearer, and as you can see on the back as well, the rangefinder viewfinder on the Seagull is a little bit bigger than the one on the Balda, so it was very difficult to actually compose the shot on the Balda, especially when you have to wear glasses like me. So beyond that, I think I'm gonna have to look at that when I get home. But beyond that, I think the Balda is slightly easier to dial in the aperture and the shutter speed that you want, because they're not coupled together, so you can just move them independently. Whereas on the Seagull, you've got to remember to just lift a little arm at the front, so you can set the aperture and shutter speed separately. But beyond that, they both operate in a similar way. So yeah, so obviously you've seen the results, so yeah, fingers crossed that they turn out okay. So I'm currently on exposure, God, it's hard to see, 9. So what does that give me? 9, 10, 11, 12. So I've got potentially another 4 exposures left on these cameras. As I said earlier, I'm going to the cliche Dutch barn at Sixpenny Handley on Monday, so I'll take a couple there, and I've got a bit of time now before I have to go back to work. So what I was going to do is on the way back home from West Bay to where I live in Dorset, you actually drive past a place, or close to a place, called Mapperton House, and it's an historic house that you can visit and pay to go in and see the gardens and the house and that kind of sort of thing. But there is a public footpath that I've walked along before where you get a good view of the house. So I think I might just go there on the way home, take the shot with both of these cameras. So let's get packed up and let's go and head on to Mapperton. So see you in a bit. So that's Mapperton done. I just saw an interesting building on the way down here. It's the Mapperton's Village Hall, so I might just have a quick look at that. If not, the next B-roll you'll see is when I'm at Sixpenny Handley, trying to scope out the Dutch barn there for a future sunrise or sunset photo shoot. But for the meantime, I'm going to go there and take some film, so see you then.